Good morning, family. We're going to continue on in our study of 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Continuing in our study of 1 Corinthians. Today we're in chapter 13. Said that weird, sorry. While you're all turning there, I said it this morning during Bible class. If you're not aware, there are peaches in the back. Please take them. They're going to go bad in the next couple of days. And I don't want to smell them on Monday. So... in chapter 12, which is a much longer chapter, but Paul ends with the discussion of spiritual gifts, right? And he's going to talk about spiritual gifts in chapter 14 as well. And some of my issue reading through this, studying through it, and having been to quite a few Bible classes on it, is that once again, we treat the Bible like the chapters are almost more important than the words themselves. And we want to act as if each chapter is its own book. And if we do that, it's easy to say that chapter 13 has nothing to do with spiritual gifts. Nothing at all. Doesn't mention them, not once. But just as we've talked about before, this is an epistle. This is a letter. Nobody writes letters like that. Nobody writes letters where they talk about this topic and then change without any reason or notice to a different topic that is completely unrelated and then change back to the original topic. You could shift back and forth on topics, but your theme is going to remain. There's always something that caused you to move topics. So this idea that chapter 13 has nothing to do with spiritual gifts is a fallacy. For those of you that don't know, that means it's wrong. It doesn't work when you read it as a letter, when you read it as a whole. Chapter 13 is a direct result of what he says at the end of chapter 12. Almost like it's a letter. He says in verse 31 of chapter 12, but earnestly desire the greater gifts, and I show you a still more excellent way. So what's chapter 13 talking about? Love. But he's explaining what the greater way is, right? He's just talked about the spiritual gifts, the prophetic gifts, the miraculous gifts. They're wonderful. And he says that you should pursue these. But I'm going to show you an even better way. And then he starts talking about love. We ought to remember that the two chapters that go together, they're not different books. They're not even different topics. He's explaining in chapter 13 what he just said. I will show you a still more excellent way. And then he says, if I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but do not have love, I have become a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have the gift of prophecy and know all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. And if I give all my possessions to feed the poor, and if I deliver my body to be burned, but do not have love, it profits me nothing. So what's the better way? The more excellent way. Spiritual gifts are great. Miraculous gifts are wonderful, but love is better. In fact, love is what gives all of these things meaning and purpose. If you don't love who you're talking to, what good is the idea that you can talk in a language they understand? If you don't love the people of God, what's the purpose of you prophesying and telling them God's message? If you don't love God, what's the value of your faith? You believe in God, you obey what he tells you to do, but you really don't care much for that. Does that make sense? And most of you would answer, no, that's an impossibility, but it's not. There are tons of people that are resentful for their faith, whether they realize it or not. People who follow God because they are aware of the consequences of not, and they don't want to disappoint the people they care about maybe, but ultimately they don't want to do this. They don't want to be here. They don't want to be reading their scriptures. They don't want to be praying. They don't want to be singing. In fact, I've met a great many people. You got to ask yourself why they even bother getting up in the morning. Hey, seriously, it's Sunday, guys. Sleep in. Like there's people that you meet in church. Not only is it a rough week for them, right? And I told somebody already this morning, this was a rough week for me. I woke up, my wife said, "What's wrong?" I was like, I just don't want to do this today. I just don't want to church today. I'd be lying if I said I don't have weeks where I say that when I get up. Sometimes I just don't feel like I have the energy. Right? And it's important in those moments to understand that I have an obligation. I have, as Dan brought up this morning, commitments. Right? But you meet people in the congregation, and if you've known one, you know them. That's every week. And it's not just one thing they don't have the energy. They don't want any of it. And you got to ask yourself, what good is any of this? If you hate worshiping God so much, if it's just so tiring to you all the time, why are you even here? How are you going to claim that your faith saves you when you feel as if it's a burden? And we do. We look at what God expects out of us, what God commands from us. We look at the works that God puts before us, and we feel burdened by them. Like so much has been put on our plates, we just couldn't possibly have the time for this. And I'm convinced that the problem is how we approach our understanding and our relationship with God. We approach this with this intellectual, albeit obedient, but intellectual understanding. We read our scriptures, we study our scriptures from a logical, purely logical and academic reference point. What I mean is we look at the original language, we look at the specific words that are chosen, we look at the context, we know the vocabulary, we memorize the words. But where's that? That's not the same as a relationship. Let me explain to you the difference. Relationship is different because I can understand everything that my boss at work expects of me. I can go to my job description and the company rules and I can know every single thing that my boss will allow me to do and won't allow me to do based on what's written. And I can conduct myself based on that. And I'd be right to do so. But that's not a relationship. The relationship is that I know that if I woke up in the morning and I went down and made breakfast, no matter how great that breakfast is, my wife's going to be upset if I leave the kitchen a mess. She'd rather I not cook at all. Is that a rule? No. There's no rule, there's no command. But I know one is approved of and one isn't. And I don't need her to tell me that. I can tell you, I don't even know that I have an experience I can point to that has led me to knowing that about her. But I know her. After being married for a few years now, I know her to know that would upset her. That's relationship. We get to a point with our relationship with God, I don't need to be able to go to a specific verse and say, that's not what God wants me to do. You get to a point where this has become a part of your identity. It's who you are. And you don't need a list of instructions to give you every single command. Just be the right person. right? Having a relationship with God, and when we bring this up, there's this common denominator. Somebody will say, well, yeah, but you can't have a relationship with somebody without hearing what they say, meaning you got to be in the scriptures, you got to study the scriptures. Absolutely. If you don't know what God says, you don't have a relationship with him at all. But if all you know about God is what he says in the Bible, you also don't have a relationship with him. We make coming to church about obedience. We make living correctly about obedience. We make following the commands about obedience, and obedience is important. I've talked about that many, many times. Faith cannot exist without obedience, but we're obedient to the word, to the command, to the list of instructions and rules and expectations. And at some point, we got to get to the point where we're obedient to the relationship we have with him. The difference is when I'm obedient to my relationship with God, I'm never upset about having to be obedient. When I'm obedient to who God has turned me into, I'm never angry because I have to do what God wants me to do. There's a difference in the having relationship. There's a reason we use that word relationship. And it's not just because he died for you. That doesn't make somebody a friend. There's many men and women who've given their lives so that I can have freedom, and I don't have a single relationship with any of them. It's not hateful of me. I'm just saying I don't even know them. Right? I can support the military. It doesn't mean I have a relationship with them. Right? Having a relationship, there is a personal level to it, an interaction that no one else is going to quite get. No matter how much I talk to you about what God means to me, you are never going to have an understanding of the depth of it, the gravity of it. You're never truly going to have the understanding that I have because it's a relationship. And no matter how deep your relationship with God gets, it's never quite the same because it's not my relationship. See, while God is constant, I am not. While God never changes, the fact is there's two equations to the relationship, and the other side of that equation never looks the same twice. So we're looking at this concept of love, and I bring this up because you start having to ask yourself, well, what is love? What does it mean telling the truth, no matter how much it hurts? Does it mean being nice, even if it means sacrificing the truth? What does it mean being tolerant, letting people be who they are? Does it mean sacrifice? Always willing to give myself for the sake of others, even when there's nothing left to give. What does love mean? He's talked about how pointless everything is without it. Don't you think it's an important conversation to have? And yet, you go around, you ask people, what is love? And you would be astounded by the different descriptions, the different definitions of love. Nobody quite has the same idea of what it means. And that's just the people who have an answer to the question. It's flabbergasting how many people call themselves Christians, how many people have lived in the church, gone to church for years and years and years, and can't tell you what love actually is. They want to point to the three Greek words. They want to talk about the self-serving, self-sacrificing kind of love and the brotherly love and all of that. And I'll remind you that there's another Greek word that is not found in the scriptures, but is still right alongside that. And it's talking about the love between a husband and a wife. It's talking about a physical love. We don't talk about that because Fact is, there are a lot of people that want to pretend like they're experts in Greek that know almost nothing about Greek except for what some other preacher told them. So why bring this up? Why am I mentioning all of this? Because you telling me that the Greeks had 3 or 4 words for love and that each one meant something different doesn't define love. You're just telling me what some other person thinks love is. And really, the Greeks thought love was all encompassing. They only gave those 4 words because they felt that love looked different depending on, wait for it, the relationship. The relationship between a husband and a wife, that's still love, but it doesn't look the same. It doesn't react the same. It doesn't result in the same action. The love between 2 men it doesn't look the same. It doesn't react the same. It's still love. The love between God and man, it doesn't look the same. It doesn't. Each relationship changes how we react to love. But even the Greeks had the understanding that love is love. So how do we define love? Well, Paul does a pretty good job here. He says, love is patient, love is kind, and is not jealous. Love does not brag and is not arrogant. Does not act unbecomingly. It does not seek its own. It is not provoked, does not take into account a wrong suffered, does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices with the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. But if there are gifts of prophecy, they will be done away. So, before we get into the extent of love, Paul has just given us a pretty good working definition by telling us what love is not, by telling us what love is. So you ask yourself, well, do I love this person? And then when this always goes towards spouses, I'm telling you, you look at anybody in your life or even your relationship with God and you ask yourself, are you patient? How long do you wait for an answer from God? Is it the same amount of time he was willing to wait for you? God waited 23 years for me to accept anything he's had. 23 years, God patiently waited. How often have I prayed and expected some kind of answer from him within a month or a week or even by the end of the day? My relationship with God, is it patient? Because what we do know is that God loves us no matter how we feel about him. So the standard always goes back to, how does God react with us? Are you as patient with other people as God has been with you? Are you as patient with yourself as God has been with you? He says, love is kind and is not jealous. This gets more and more complicated because then we got to ask ourselves, what's the definition of this? What's the definition of that? Who gets to define kindness? It's a difficult one because so often we look at the way we talk to one another, and because I don't like what you said or how you said it, that must mean that you were unkind. So what does it mean to be kind? What does it mean to actually be nice to somebody? I would say that it means being generous. I would say that it means concerning yourself with the other person's well-being. So is it kind when somebody's stern with you, or assertive, or even authoritative. Well, we know God is kind, isn't he? He must, because God is love. So any definition that has the scriptures apply to love must apply to God. So it's safe to say God must be kind. So how has God treated people? Has he always spoken with gentleness? Has he always said things that didn't offend people? Has he ever said anything that was a little too forward, a little too aggressive, a little too brazen? How often did he say things only because he thought that's what the other person wanted to hear? So we look at those kind of things and we think that's kindness. But there's been times in my life the greatest kindness anyone's ever done for me is to say they never want to speak to me again. There's been times my greatest act of kindness in another person's life is, you got to get this straightened out or I don't want to talk to you again. It also changes based on the individuals because, again, relationship, right? You see, if I receive words of kindness from some of the women in my life, they're going to look a lot different than if I receive words of kindness from the men in my life. And those of you that have a relationship with both genders, you know what I'm going with this, right? Because so often a mother figure or even a woman or, my wife, if they're trying to be kind, they'll say things that are gentle and encouraging and things that I go to tell my boys, hey, I'm really run down. I don't want to do this. I'm angry. I'm upset. Too bad. Get over it. Get to work. That's them being kind. Seems a little ridiculous to women when I say that. And the men will say, absolutely. Why? Because I leave that conversation emboldened and encouraged because they knew what I was saying. They heard me. And I also understand that they're saying it doesn't matter. They haven't dismissed how I felt. They didn't say I didn't have a right to feel that way. They didn't excuse the behavior of the other party. They just said, keep moving. So kindness doesn't always look the same. It's about what that other person needs. And sometimes we get it wrong. But ultimately, it's about supporting that other person, whether they like it or not. We move into other definitions. And again, it's just, I'm not going to go through each individual one of these. But I want to encourage you, measure it by the standard of God. Right? He's not arrogant. How many of us have been told we're arrogant? Just me? Just me and Ron? Right? Well, how do you define arrogance? Isn't arrogance meaning that you believe you're better than other people? I mean, isn't that kind of the definition of arrogance? I don't preach because I think I'm better than everyone else. If I did, I wouldn't see the point of wasting my time talking to you. I certainly don't answer your phone calls because I think I'm better than you. I don't come to visit you on the weekends because I think I'm better than you. I don't worry and stress and pray over every individual member of the church because I think I'm better than all of you. And I'm only speaking from my end because there are other men who've also been called arrogant, and I'm guessing more than one woman that have been called arrogant here today. And I'm telling you, we have a really wrongful understanding of that word. And at the end of the day, when we call somebody else arrogant, aren't we assessing the heart ultimately? I'm saying I know that you place more value on yourself than you do everyone else. How the heck am I supposed to know that? How in the world would I know how much value you place on other people in your heart? We got to be careful about using the words that we use, about making the accusations we make against people. Because by telling somebody you're arrogant, I'm also telling them you're not loving. That might not mean much to the rest of the world, but within the confines of the sainthood, that's a pretty big accusation. Because as Paul has just said, without it, nothing else matters. The minute you tell me that I'm unloving, you tell me my faith is pointless, my words are meaningless, my actions have absolutely no value. You have just completely wiped away any value of my existence. That's what Paul tells us. Without love, none of this means anything. And you can't call somebody arrogant without also saying you're unloving, because love is absent of arrogance. You see, the world uses words like they mean nothing. They're careless with them. They'll throw out accusations. Well, it's just a moment, or it's just an aspect or a character trait. But to us, these have real spiritual implications, eternal implications. You can't call somebody arrogant without also placing condemnation on their soul. You can't say somebody's unkind without making an assessment of their soul. Does that mean that we never make that assessment? No. But you need to be careful about assigning values. What I mean by that is, there is a difference. If somebody says something to me that I felt sounded arrogant, there is a difference in me saying, that sounded this way. Are you sure? Is that what you meant? Versus, you have a lot of arrogance you need to figure out. One is me asking for clarification. I have an issue with something you just said. Could you make sure that you don't mean what I think you meant? One is, you're hell. You feel like hell, you sound like hell, you're probably going to hell. Does it sound harsh? Because anytime you make an accusation against somebody's soul like that, that's what it feels like on the receiving end. Let's keep going with this. It says it does not take into account a wrong suffered. I've heard and read, I guess I should say read, not heard, but I read more than I listen. I've read a lot of commentary, and I've read authors who bring up this verse, and they have phrases, right? Everything but the kitchen sink. It's usually referring to a husband fighting with a wife, and the wife will throw everything but the kitchen sink at you, right? Bring up everything you've done wrong in the past. My wife doesn't do this, okay? I'm just talking in generalities. I don't want anyone to come up to me after church and be like, you were really hard on your wife. I'm not talking about my wife. I've learned after 4 years, I got to cover my bases up here. This idea of everything but the kitchen sink, there's a wrongness in it, right? It's wrong. You can't say that you've forgiven somebody of something and then want to bring it up next time they do something wrong, right? But that's not actually what this is talking about. There's other verses that address that, but that's not what this is talking about. This is talking about how we treat each other, right? And there's times you'll get called fake if you do this. There's times you'll get called two-faced for doing this. But I'm telling you, what this verse is actually talking about is how I treat you, how I act towards you, how I talk to you, does not take into consideration that I felt like you wronged me last week. Doesn't affect it. So when somebody comes up and says something mean to me, tells me they got sick of listening to me, tells me I'm a windbag, tells me I'm too condemning or whatever, criticizes me in some kind of way, I don't treat you differently because I felt you wronged me. It's a really hard lesson for us. There's a lot of you, I can already see it. A lot of you want to disagree with me, but you can't because it's a sermon, not a Bible class. I know. I never let anyone talk during the sermon, right? But the thing is, I want you to consider this. How does God treat people? Does he treat them differently because they've done wrong things in the past? The way God treats people, it's always an assessment of what they're doing right now. You look at the apostles, right? When Peter starts arguing with him and telling him he can't do the thing that he says he was sent here to do, what does he tell him? Get thee behind me, Satan. We might not feel that as very harsh, but Jesus just called you the enemy, his enemy. It's kind of a big deal for somebody that gave up his whole life to follow the guy, isn't it? But Jesus didn't start treating him differently because he encouraged him not to do what he was supposed to do. In the moment, he corrected him. And when Peter stopped doing that, Jesus moved forward with the relationship. You look at other stories in the scriptures when somebody walked away. We just got finished studying Jonah together, right? Jonah runs from God. God corrects him in the moment. So long as you're running away from him, bad things are happening. But what happened when Jonah finally decided, you know what, I'll just go ahead and do this thing? When he finally goes to Nineveh, when he does what he's supposed to do, how does God treat him? Well, suddenly he's making sure he's fed, making sure he's got shade, making sure he's got a place to sleep. When I'm bringing up this point, again, the standard is God, right? Because God is the standard of love. So when I tell you that whether I feel that somebody has wronged me in the past cannot change how I treat them, that's what it means. It doesn't matter if you were a horrible person to me yesterday and you treated me like dirt. Today you're a brother in Christ. It doesn't matter if you have a pattern of treating me poorly. You're a brother in Christ. Does this mean that we open ourselves up for abuse? Absolutely it does. You're all wrong. Absolutely it does. If you are acting like Jesus, you are going to open yourself up for abuse. You want proof? What does Jesus tell his disciples to expect? They hated me, they're gonna hate you. They treated me poorly, they're gonna treat you poorly. And you love them anyways. People are gonna hurt you. Forgiving them will allow them to hurt you more. But who you are and what you're called to do is not based on the actions of others. It's based on only the actions of God. I don't get to change who I am to be a horrible person or a greedy person or an uncruel person and say, but I'm a good Christian. You know, I'm not really greedy. I'm just not generous with that person. And then you're not generous. Well, I'm a forgiving person, but that person wronged me too much. Well, then you're not forgiving. I'm a kind person. I just really don't like that. Then you're not kind. The thing is, if that is who you are, it's absolute. It only becomes subjective, right? That means based on external influences or causality. It only becomes subjective when it's not our identity and is just an act. If you're generous when you feel like being generous and not when you don't feel like being generous, then you're not a generous person. You're just somebody who did something once. If you're nice only because other people are nice to you, you're not a nice person. You're just somebody who found somebody else that was nice to them. And people are going to hurt you for it. People are going to abuse you for it. When Jesus said, turn the other cheek, it wasn't so that that person could walk away. Fact is, relationship hurts. You point at a single relationship in the history of man and try to claim that there wasn't some betrayal involved somewhere, and you'd be lying. Every single relationship has had them. I don't care how good your marriage is. At some point, you have felt betrayed by something they said or something they did or a decision made or a look given. I don't care how good of a parent you are or how well behaved your kids are. At some point, they have disobeyed you or disrespected you, or they feel like you were too harsh with them. Every relationship that has ever existed has involved some form of betrayal. In order to act like Jesus, we have to pursue the relationship that Jesus showed us, that God has shown us. But no matter how betrayed I feel, no matter how often, no matter how bad it was, no matter how fresh it was, the relationship is offered. I can't force anyone to be in a relationship. Certainly won't force anyone to have a relationship with me, but it's there. And it doesn't matter if you've wronged me. It doesn't matter if you've hurt me. The relationship is there. Why? Because that's what God shows us. That's what God shows us. We make excuses for our behaviors, right? Because we're not supposed to tell people certain things. We're not supposed to say certain things. I'm not supposed to get up here and tell you that you have to put up with abuse as a Christian. I'm not supposed to say that. But guess what? You do. It's a simple fact of the faith. We already saw in a previous chapter where he's addressing church members suing one another, and he even says that. Wouldn't it be better for you to just let them wrong you? Being a Christian means that the world is not going to be okay with you. They're not going to be nice to you. And unfortunately, Christians are people. They came to Christ because they realized they were people, and people kind of suck sometimes. And so even if you isolated yourself within the church and didn't deal with anyone that wasn't a Christian, guess what? You're going to feel abused. You're going to get hurt. You're going to feel wronged. And unless everyone thinks that they're going to go live as a hermit in the woods of Canada, at some point you got to realize that you're supposed to get over that stuff. You're supposed to forgive and move on. That's what forgiveness means. We get so wrapped up in, well, does forgive mean forget? Who cares? I don't care if you remember it. Stop treating them as if they're still guilty. And it doesn't matter how many times it happens. And the silly thing is, we could go through example after example, story after story. How many times ought we to forgive our brother who wrongs us? Every one of you can say 70 times 7. How many times should you forgive a spouse who is unfaithful? None. Divorce them. Well, it's weird, isn't it? Supposedly your relationship with your spouse is supposed to be so close, but you're quicker to forgive somebody who wrongs you a little bit than you are to forgive the person that you committed your whole life to for one When we think that forgiving them is license to continue in the abuse, but it's not. It's a license to continue in the relationship. God's forgiveness of us does not mean that we get to continue in sin. It doesn't mean it's okay now. We can sin as much as we want. Clearly, he's not going to leave us. It means, no, I'm still going to allow you this relationship. Stop doing that. How many of you are hurt by this? Every time I talk about this subject, and it's why I would much rather preach on it than teach a class on it, because classes are chaotic when it comes to this. Everyone's got an example. What about parents that wronged you? Don't care. What about abusive parents? Don't care. Abusive spouses? Don't care. See, that's the beauty of this. When you're objective and you're intellectually honest and emotionally honest about the scriptures, I don't care what hypothetical you come up with. The truth is the truth. And the truth is, you cheated on God. You abused his children. You were cruel to the ones he loved. You disregarded him and disrespected him. All of us are guilty of all the things that we hold to other people. And God still holds his hand out in acknowledgement, in an offering of relationship. That's love. It's not conditional on whether you treat me the way I think you ought to treat me. It's a choice that I'm going to have this relationship. I'm going to offer this relationship to you regardless of how you treat it. And I know this hurts because some of you have had abusive spouses, and some of you have been abused by people in your lives that you really cared about, and you feel betrayed. And some of you are victims of child abuse or victims of sexual abuse. I get it. There's a lot of hurt in the world. People can be horrible and cruel. That's the entire reason we're here, is because we've been horrible and we've been cruel, and we need somebody to tell us how to do it better. That was the whole reason Jesus came. Jesus could have died for us without living 30 years on the earth. The whole reason he came was to show us you can do this better. But you can't accept forgiveness of yourself. You can't accept that you get to move on in a healthy, good relationship with a good, giving God, and then refuse that same offer to someone else. You can't expect people you love in your life to forgive you for the wrongs that you've done to them, and you've done plenty, and then say, but that person hurt me too much. Do you get how this works? At the end of the day, this comes down to don't be a hypocrite. Because we've all committed adultery. We've all committed idolatry. We've all murdered, and we've all stolen. We've all dishonored our parents. We've all failed to keep God as holy. And if one of us is a lawbreaker, all of us are a lawbreaker. We've got to stop trying to define these things for ourselves. We've got to stop making excuses so that we can make things mean what we want them to mean. We bring up our personal situations or our hypotheticals, expecting the person trying to tell us the truth to change their answer, to cater to us. If I tell you that love means that you're willing to offer that relationship of forgiveness, and somebody goes, well, but what about my parents? They beat me while I was a child. Guess what? Mine did too. But I don't get to claim that I'm a forgiving person if I can't forgive them for it. Does it mean I have a relationship? No, I don't. But I've been asked whether I would have a relationship with them by their family. And I told them the same thing. As long as they're willing to continue it in a healthy way, I don't mind. That's not easy for me. Forgiveness is not easy on anybody that's giving the forgiveness. It takes sacrifice to forgive somebody. This is the whole gospel story. Verse 8, he says, love never fails, but if there are gifts of prophecy, they will be done away. If there are tongues, they will cease. If there is knowledge, it will be done away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when the perfect comes, the partial will be done away. When I was a child, I used to speak as a child, think as a child, reason as a child. When I became a man, I did away with the childish things. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know fully, just as I also have been fully known. But now abide faith, hope, love, these three. But the greatest of these is love. I want to address this. I know some of you are reminding me of time. Doesn't matter. The doors are the doors, right? When we're talking about love and prophecy and gifts, we like I said, we separate this chapter up, but right here he brings it all back together and he says, I'm still talking about spiritual gifts. He's saying you're sitting here, you're so focused on these spiritual gifts. You're so focused on the gifts you don't have. And we failed to realize that the gift everyone is given is being neglected. We're so focused on these things that only give us a glimpse of holiness, only give us a glimpse of righteousness, and we're completely ignoring the thing that shows us God's glory and fullness. We're so worried about speaking in tongues and interpreting and prophesying. We're so worried about why we don't, who can have gifts of healing and who can have gifts of wisdom. And we're so focused on these spiritual gifts that we fail to realize every single one of us has been given the gift of love. We've all been called to utilize the gift of love, and it's love that gives us the perfect image of God. And these other things, they're just peripherals. We spend so much time worried about minor issues. How much time do we spend studying these minor details? Well, what does the gift of tongues mean? What does it sound like? What does it look like? I don't care. I certainly don't have it. What's the gift of interpretation? I don't care. Because again, I certainly don't have it. I've never interpreted any language. I've never spoken in any foreign language. I can't barely speak English sometimes. So why would I waste hours and hours, weeks and weeks worrying about this one detail? Well, I gotta prove those snake charmers wrong. I gotta prove the Baptist wrong. I don't need to prove any of them wrong. Because ultimately, love is the answer, far more than any other answer you're ever going to come up with. Love covers a multitude of sins. That's God's words. God is love. That's God's word. Love is such a pivotal point of our faith. So I got to ask, what's your relationship and look like? What's it looking like lately? Do you feel like God talks to you? Do you feel like God sees you? Do you feel as if you're in the presence of God? Are you even trying to be in the presence of God? What's your relationship looking like? Does it look like love? Or does it look like an Amazon shopping cart? I'm telling you, love is a defining trait of who we are. And love is offered. It's that hand out, offering you a relationship, no matter how you've treated it in the past. Do you have a relationship with the one who loves you? The only one who has loved you perfectly? Or are you still just rejecting and betraying them? This morning we want to make an offer to you. If you need help in that relationship, whether it's counsel, whether it's prayers, whether it's the beginning of that relationship, if you're finally willing to accept it, to move forward with the only person that has ever loved you, that will never betray you. That relationship begins with your renewal, a restoration of the Spirit found in the waters of baptism. So whatever your needs are this morning, we ask that you bring them forward, make them known, so we can help you see them met as we stand and sing.